Welcome to Conservative Voice Radio. I am your host, Douglas V. Gibbs, and we are broadcasting from the Pass area on 1490 AM and online worldwide at KMET1490am.com. And I am coming to you with a group, the local Tea Party group that has put on their radio program, but this isn't about right, left, or in between. This is about America. This is about bringing America back to what the Founding Fathers originally intended and getting active locally. What was the whole point of even getting this started?
Well, the idea of our talk radio show and also our Tea Party meetings is to get more self-governments in the Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley area. And what that means is for local citizens to become more involved in local government, state government, and most of all, the federal government, Congress. And that's the main objective, just to increase awareness and get people actually getting off the couch and doing something. And we're hoping to make a little bit of difference in our area and perhaps make a big difference in the whole country. So that's where I'm coming from. That's my purpose. We wanted to get a radio show started primarily to reach out and get people off the couch and get involved, going to the city council meetings, getting involved with their local political party they're a member of, and hopefully some coming to our Tea Party meetings and seeing what we're up to.
The gentleman who was just speaking is Glenn Stoll. You can find him online at glennstoll.com, GLENNSTULL.com. You'll also find information about the group. I also have in here with me Jan and Tom. I'll let them introduce themselves in a moment. We've got a lot of topics to talk about today. I hope you stay with us for the entire show because I think you're going to be quite informed by the end of the program. And before we get into the topic, I want to give the opportunity for the other folks in the room to introduce themselves. Jan, why are you on this program with us?
Well, I have become active reluctantly. I hadn't realized that I was very, very interested in what was going on in my country until 2008 when the massive bank bailout happened, and I started to pay attention along with millions of other people. And gradually trying to find out why we had to fork over $700 billion from our treasury to major banks, I thought, I've got to pay attention. Politics matters. And so I joined a Tea Party back in 2009 and was basically on the periphery. And since that time, I've kind of gained momentum because I realize how important things are happening in our country.
You know, you're so much like so many Americans. I can't count how many people I talk to who are very involved politically, and they weren't. A guest I had on my Constitution radio program on KCAA, Don Dix, he's a very involved person. I talked to him, he says, hey, until a few years ago, I really wasn't involved. I really didn't even care. I didn't think I could do anything. I didn't think that my voice mattered. And, as he's watched things go on in this country that he didn't approve of, he's gotten very involved. Tom, I'm assuming your angle is very similar.
No, not quite. I think I was more of being on the couch rather than being participating.
So you knew what was going on. You just weren't doing much about it. You were just throwing bricks at the TV.
And what I think I've observed is our people who vote somehow are missing the boat. We're not getting the information. They're not involved. I refer to it as a melees. And my interest more than anything, I'm more of a technical guy by background. I'm not a communication person. I'm more interested in how do we get people to really care.
Tom, back with you here, Glenn Stoll. I think that's pretty normal for young people. They have families, they have children. They're getting their career started. I think people go through different stages of life. But I think once you get up into your 30s, 40s, and 50s, that's when I started thinking about what was going on politically. But I found myself frustrated because I didn't feel like I could really make a difference. And that's the problem. A lot of people that I talk to think, what difference does my vote make?
Well, that's the difference between the informed and the uninformed. And let me add this before we go into our first hot topic. When the nation was founded, people who were allowed to vote were property owners. And that was it. Why was it that way? It was because they had skin in the game. They were informed because they were paying taxes. The average person who did not just labor day to day and was renting or something like that, they didn't really own anything, they had nothing to vote for. And the fear was that if the uninformed were voting, what would happen is the politicians would figure out all they'd have to do is buy their vote, offer them something from the Treasury. And that's how they would get their votes. And that's exactly what has happened. And so we have an entire class of voters in this country whose votes are bought, and they're uninformed. they're not voting because of what's best for the country or what's best for their state, but what's best for their wallet. And that's where I think the danger really lies. Now, on this show, every week, we're going to have 3 hot topics. We're going to begin the shows with the second biggest story of the week. After the middle of the show, we will get into the biggest story of the week. And then the final topic will be the third largest, something that will just get you thinking. We also will have some local information, something that's going on locally here in the Pass area, as well as some general issues, things that you really don't hear talked about anywhere else. Now, hot topic, our first top topic today, the second largest story of the week, not very long ago, was the State of the Union address by President Barack Obama. And from what I'm understanding, because I didn't have the chance to listen to it, you 3 did, so this is your part of the show. But from what I'm hearing and understanding is it was a rehash of everything he's always said. And my question is, what was your opinion about the State of the Union first? And then I'll get into another question in a moment. Jan, why don't you start that off?
Well, I watched it reluctantly because after 6 years, I'm very disillusioned with this president. While I did not vote for him, I also felt like millions of other people, let's give the guy a chance and see what he's about to do. That was way back. Last night, what it was a rehash. I felt that it was part campaign promise from 2004 when he hit the ground running and people found him to be a new star. And secondly, the feeling I got was that he was about to give all these freebies, which is typical of his administration. We're going to give free college, etc., and lots of clapping, but it was all so familiar. And then at the very end, now mind you, this is a guy that was repudiated in the last election because all of the Republicans have won throughout the nation. His thinking was, why can't we all get along? We have to stop being so political. We really have to listen to the other guy. And I started shaking my head, and I got very sad. And I said, if you had come into your presidency with that attitude, I think it could have been a whole other picture. Now, after the repudiation, he's ready to talk? I don't think so.
Tom, what was your opinion about the State of the Union address?
Okay, what really got to me was, and actually what bothered me, what got to me was the fact that he was proclaiming all the great accomplishments. The unemployment rate is down at 5.7 and so on. And getting back to the people that are hearing what he has to say, a lot of people are probably believing that.
Well, yeah, but now that's what we expect, right? The great accomplishments. That's what the State of the Union, if things are going wonderfully, except for they're not. I mean, you mentioned the unemployment rate, but yet the number of people that are out of work is at a record high. So
we have a booming stock market. I just looked at my last 6-month annuity report. I lost money. So where's this booming thing that I'm missing out on? And I didn't come up with that plan, that investment plan.
All right, so you feel that the president wasn't completely honest during the State of the Union. Glenn, what was your opinion of the State of the Union address?
Well, the way he come across, he really sounded pretty good because he was saying all kind of wonderful things and everything, and he said it in a manner that he really believed it was true. He believed what he was saying. And I think that's something the American people ought to have a little fear about when a person starts believing their own misrepresentations. Unless he's super intelligent and able to really be an actor and come across and tell something that's totally untrue and believe it. But there was a hidden message in there that he come across, and that was talking about racism in America. Right now, racism is a problem in this country because of all the turmoil that's been going on. And he more or less admitted that it's been a failure during his administration. Of course, he doesn't want to take any responsibility for it. And I think that's an issue, and it's been an issue with the conservative groups because anybody that has disagreed with Obama by the progressive left has been called racist. And I don't think that's true at all.
Okay, so we've got disingenuous, not being truthful, not being upfront. Now, do you feel that the media is a part of this? I mean, they're propping up this administration.
No question.
They're not because remember,
Absolutely.
The media used to be the watchdog.
Exactly.
Now they're the lapdog.
Yes. They've gone from journalism to stenography, if anybody can remember that old term. Just basically becoming a White House organ. Whatever the White House wants them to inform the people is what the people get. I find that alarming because I remember the days of Pravda where they gave those poor folks in the Soviet Union only the news they were supposed to hear.
You know, and the question is now is what he's been saying, what this administration is doing, what the media, how they're treating it, is that in line with American values, Tom?
I don't think so. I think for whatever reason, I'm not sure why this happened. At one time, journalism was an issue where you discussed the actual news, not kind of going along with the message.
Right. Well, I think the large sums of money have been passing hands when that stimulus money Jan talked about. I think a lot of that money has found its hands in the individuals that have been able to acquire vast sums of interest in the media in the United States. Mm-hmm. And people with money and influence have a fear of government. And I think a lot of the media goes along with progressive left because they want to maintain their position of power. Just recently, we've seen a journalist lose their job. I think it was CBS just wrote a book, and she's on the outs now because she wanted to report some stories
about the real issues.
And
they don't want to hear about reality.
You're listening to Conservative Voice Radio on 1490 AM KMET, and at the bottom of the hour we're going to discuss terror in Europe and how it's coming to America. It may already be here. Now, in line with what we've been talking about, what we understand is we need to be active locally and, active in politics locally. When I say locally, I don't mean just your city council, but your local representatives, and who represents your district, so on and so forth. Jan, how do we become more active locally?
Well, when I joined the Tea Party, at first it was to keep informed, but then I realized that we had congressional seats that were opening up, and realizing the state of California and the difference from when I moved here 25 years ago and now, I thought I really have to back candidates that I've researched, and that's how I became active.
Tom, what do you think?
As far as I'm concerned, I was involved in what I call the downward slide to eternity. I really wasn't doing anything. And then Glenn sort of gave me a boost.
So for you, it's just getting off the couch.
Getting off the couch.
So Glenn, how do people get active locally?
Well, I think that the first realization is that we're all on that eternal ramp to nowhere, I guess, or to heaven. But we each have to come to the realization we really can make a big difference. You need to join a local group, get affiliated with others, and learn how to make a difference.
In other words, you got to just be active. Do something. Don't just sit there. Do something. And when it comes to doing something, that doesn't mean running up to your politician and poking them in the chest and making them mad. It means being involved, creating a relationship with these people and getting to know them. And when we come back after this break, we're going to talk about a local guy, Congressman Raul Reese. Don't go anywhere.
Professional law offices of Hartzler and Hartzler have provided affordable legal expertise to Pass area businesses and families. If your business is considering contracts, litigation, employee, or product services, Mark Hartzler, licensed California attorney, will guide and represent your company's requirement, addressing both external and internal threats to your business with his valued experience since 1994. Mark's law partner and wife, Nancy Hartzler, also a licensed California attorney, provides legal guidance and expertise in wills, trusts, and estate planning. Nancy helps clients and their families through trust administration and the complicated probate process. Call Hartzler and Hartzler for a complimentary telephone consultation at 213-864-3572. That's 213-864-3572. Welcome to a Tea Party Minute. Who and what are the Tea Party? You may have heard good and bad things about it. Back in 2008, the Tea Party formed from a grassroots movement. Not a political party, just everyday people you probably know. At the time, during the massive government bailout, people began to take notice, ask questions. Gradually, these groups got together and realized that Washington wasn't following the Constitution very well. And in 2010, 2012, and again in 2014, they elected some people to Congress who believe more in our Constitution than in their own re-election, and that this is the people's government, not the government's government. That's a good thing. And there's lots more to tell you about what the Tea Party is. Why not join us? The Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley Tea Party meets the second Thursday of each month at the Farmhouse Restaurant in Banning. And check us out on Facebook at BBCV TeaParty.net. Are you considering buying or selling a home, a commercial space, or some land in the Pass area? Think about Cherry Valley Realty, the oldest realtor office in the Pass area. This family-owned company has been in business for more than 40 years. They're happy to say that so many of their customers come back after selling or buying a property. Stop in, take Cherry Valley Boulevard exit off the I-10 freeway to Beaumont Avenue. It's located at 10385 Beaumont Avenue in downtown Cherry Valley. Or call them at 951-845-2637. That's 951-845-2637. Or the website at cherryvalleyrealty.com. 951-845-2637. cherryvalleyrealty.com.
Special thanks to the Farmhouse Restaurant. They are located at the Highland Springs Road Freeway exit between Banning and Beaumont. The Tea Party meets for breakfast at the farmhouse every Tuesday, 8 a.m. for a fellowship of like-minded conservatives. Fine food and dining at the farmhouse.
Welcome back to Conservative Voice Radio. I am your host, Douglas V. Gibbs. We are broadcasting from the Pass area on 1490 AM KMET and online worldwide at KMET1490am.com. Now, I used to be in your district. They've redrawn the lines. Now Ken Calvert is my congressman. But prior to all of that, our congressperson or congress critter was Mary Bono Mack. Now, in the press enterprise, she was quoted as calling herself a progressive Republican. And so a lot of people were really bothered by Mary Bono Mack. In fact, that ushered in the running of Clay Thibodeau against her in an election. After the lines were drawn and Mary Bono Mack lost the southwest Riverside County area, the Temecula, Murrieta, Corona, all of that, she wound up having to go up against a guy named Raul Reese, who wound up beating her, Democrat, and quite the progressive. Now, you guys are the ones that are now having to deal with this guy because I'm out of the district now down in Murrieta. But up here in Beaumont and Banning, Cherry Valley, Raul Reese is your guy. And the frustration is he doesn't represent your values, what you want politically. And somehow he was still able to pull off this win. So what's your opinion about how he pulled it off and what does he stand for? Because obviously isn't your American values.
You know, what was so stunning to me were the size and the gloss of the flyers that I got daily in my mailbox. And mostly they were denigrating his opponent, and I was frustrated because he wasn't really telling me anything I can hang my hat on. Then when you listen to his rhetoric, it was so much like Obama. It was what I will give the vets, what I will give the unemployed. Let's be concerned about this or let's be concerned about that. Nothing concrete.
What I am hearing is a lot of money.
Yeah.
It was a nasty campaign that he ran, and he's really no different than the progressive machine that's in the White House right now.
Yeah, it was a wealthy machine backing him.
All right, Jan, thank you for that. Now, Glenn, do you agree with Jan, and what's your opinion about Congressman Raul Reese, and does he fit your American values?
I agree with Jan 100%. He had the money, he had the progressive left backing, he had the establishment, and he had a few people around him that managed him very well. I don't personally know Dr. Raul Reese. He may be a wonderful person, but from his history, and that's what I looked into, his history, he's always been aligned with the progressive left from the time he was in college. He votes the left ticket right down the line with Obama. He's just a Obama lapdog is what I would call him.
Well, now you say he's in line with progressive left. He's an Obama lapdog. Do you know of any particular legislation that he has sponsored or anything that's made you feel that way, or is it just by how he presents himself, is what he says?
He supports Obamacare, federal government taking over all 20% of the economy and all the giveaway projects in the United States.
Jan, you were on...
I watched, the paper does publish their no and yes votes, and he did vote no on the XL pipeline. And that is a conservative issue. I think the Republicans are all for it. That bothered me because they're not giving it a chance. They've had 5 years to study this, and we have hundreds of miles of pipeline already in the U.S.
Yeah, well, what you're talking about is the Keystone XL pipeline, and that issue is really an American issue. They are voting ideologically, I think, only because the Republicans support it, because it makes no sense to vote against it. It creates jobs. It helps us when it comes to our domestic supply and so on and so forth. Tom, when it comes to raw research, you've been thinking about what you think of this guy?
Well, I'll just back up with what Jan just said about his vote on the Keystone Pipeline. We know pretty much he voted down the line with Obama. Now, let me back up a little bit, and maybe this is unfair, but I kind of assessed Raul Ruiz. My left brain, right brain kind of, I don't think the guy's that sharp. Now, I know he's from Harvard. Well, my daughter went to Yale, so I know a little bit about Ivy League schools. I don't think he's that smart. And in my opinion, Nastande, who had a background of more...
Okay, Nastande being the guy who ran against him in the last election,
and whatnot,
right?
I thought he was a lot sharper, especially when they debated. I didn't think
well, when you say sharp, in other words, political knowledge?
The way you speak, the way you enunciate, the way you emphasize points.
Right. Okay.
I didn't see that. We went to the rally at Repler Park there, and to me, it didn't work. And I think Glenn has a recording of the
Okay, and that's why we get involved locally, is now the goal is to work towards the next election. Now, part of the reason why we run this show, why we started this show, was to make sure that the public is properly informed. And once again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is not right versus left, Republican versus Democrat. This is about how do we get America back on track with what is our values, our American values. How do we do that? And though the Tea Party is a part of this show, and there's other groups, Constitution Association and Menifee and so forth, this is not a right thing, a left thing. This is an American thing. We're not about different groups battling each other. This is about America. Now, I'm going to assume, Glenn, that is part of the mission that you were wanting, and what you were thinking about in your mind when you were thinking about this show, creating this program.
Right. I think we come to a point in history where we're realizing the fear of our founding fathers, that we'd have an all-powerful central government. And I think it's time for the American people to weigh in. And my goal is to have a bigger effect on Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley, Cabazon, San Jacinto, Hemet, and the surrounding area to really make a difference, to get more people involved. And it's going to be a small percentage of people that actually get involved and make the difference.
Well, let me add something to that, because it's like, I used to have a vehicle in my driveway, and it was broken down. And I knew I had every tool I needed in the garage to fix it. All I had to do is go out there with my tools to fix it, right? Except for I don't know how to do it. I could have all the tools, I could have the broken vehicle, and I can go out there and I can start pounding on that engine and twisting things, and all right, it's fixed. No, because I don't have the know-how. In order to have the know-how, in order to change things, to move this country in a direction people want it to, they've got to be informed, they've got to learn how to do it. And that's, I think, a part of the purpose of this program, not just from a Tea Party point of view or a Republican point of view or a political point of view, but also a constitutional point of view. I'm a constitutional expert, so I'll insert, my constitutional prowess into it, but also from an average citizen point of view. And that's the reason why we have this panel with us, these number of local citizens talking about their area, their politics, and what they know, and how are we going to move this forward. So keep listening to become informed, listeners. You are listening to Conservative Voice Radio on KMET AM 1490. Now, our next hot topic, this is the biggest story of the week, I think, and really the biggest story of the year at this point, is the terror. And what we've been experiencing in Paris, Charlie Hebdo, the shootings, and then a paper in Germany who also publishes Charlie Hebdo, which was, for those of you who haven't been paying attention to the news, that's that publication in Paris where they were publishing political cartoons of Muhammad and Islam that was not necessarily favorable, and the response was to kill the cartoonist. A German paper that also publishes it was firebombed. So terrorism, Islamic terrorism, has become a great concern, not just in Europe, but also right here in the United States. We have over 35 terrorist training camps in the United States. So the government actually admits to 19 of them. Now, that all said, as we approach the midpoint of the show, we're moving along here. When you first learned about the attacks in Paris, what was your first feelings about it, Glenn?
Well, it took me back to 9/11 when we were attacked here, how it alarmed America. People were really had a lot of fear about this could happen anywhere again in the United States. So there was a pushback to do something about it and aggressively go on the offensive to destroy the people that are actually doing this. This is a criminal activity, and they're doing it proclaiming as a branch of Islam, Islamic terrorism, and they're going nuts.
Well, the attack in Paris, though, it caught the media's attention because, Charlie Hebdo is a part of the media, so it's like attacking their own.
Right.
So the media was willing to jump on that ball. They were willing to talk about it. But yet, at the same time, we've got people in the media, and a lot of these leaders say, yeah, but we can't say that it was Islam.
Yeah, that's the problem. You have to admit and face up to the reality. And the reality is it's a religious group of fanatics. Mm-hmm. And it's true, the majority of Islam, or people who believe in Islam, that's their religion, they don't go around killing people, but they're not stepping up and taking care of the problem.
Well, that brings up to mind an example I've used when it came to Nazi Germany. Not all Germans were Nazis, but they were worthless in the fight because they did nothing. They did not stand up against what was going on. When their guns were being taken away, when they were hearing... Well, there's a film out called Sing a Little Louder, and it's about this boy, an old man, and he has these nightmares. He's remembering when he was a boy, and he was a member of a church, and his church in Germany, there was some train tracks that ran by the church. And every day, every Sunday when they were in church, at the exact same time, the train would come by, and the pastor would preach a little louder, and the choir would sing a little louder so that they could overcome the sound of that train going by. So a little boy always had this pocket watch, and he would look at it to just see if the train would be on time, and it always was. One particular Sunday, the train stopped. He heard the screeching of the brakes, and the train stopped right in front of the church. And as the pastor was preaching, there were people in the boxcars, and they realized they were near a church, and they started screaming for help. They started yelling for help. Rather than take action, the pastor began to preach a little louder. After a while, the choir began to sing, and he tried to get the parishioners to start singing a little louder so they could drown out the noise of what was going on around them, the horror of what was outside their church. Now, so the question is, are we going to sing a little louder, or are we going to be involved and going to do something about it? Jan, that all said, when what happened in Paris at Charlie Hebdo happened, what was your first thoughts, and how did you feel about it?
Well, two things hit me. I, of course, thought of 9/11, and I also realized we had been hit a few times, but the media had kept it pretty quiet, including the administration. For instance, the 13 people that were killed on that army base by an Islamic fanatic was called workplace violence. It wasn't called radical Islam.
Well, now this would be an act of war, is it not?
Of course. So what struck me about Charlie Hebdo was that for the first time journalists were struck, and now all of a sudden it was a news story. Well, folks, where have you been?
Now, here's what's fascinating about that, because you say, okay, so journalists were hit, suddenly became a news story, yet at the same time, 2,000 people in Nigeria were killed by Boko Haram. Was it in the news at all? Nothing. Well, those were a bunch of Christians that were slaughtered.
And the Christians, the Yazidis in Iraq, were on a mountain for 4 months. Old people, children, starving.
Okay, so we have this concern that there's terrorism, and it turns out that the terrorism tends to be backed by Islamism, jihadism. And Tom, you obviously pay attention. The Paris attack happened. And you guys had also mentioned something else, which we'll go into in a minute, about Yemen. But what was your thoughts? And now that you've heard what Glenn and I and Jan have had to say about it, what's your feeling?
Our president tends not to even want to discuss the issue. He speaks about violence. He speaks about terror.
One thing I want to mention, his State of the Union speech, he mentioned that He was mainly concerned in an attack on American soil. Mm-hmm. He didn't seem to be concerned about Yemen or Syria or the poor people on a mountain or anything like that. So this takeover, apparently he's going to go along with all this.
Tom?
I'll pick up where I kind of left off. We've had this distinction between radical Islam versus Islam. I'm kind of starting to see that merge together. I'm not sure there's a difference.
Well, what we've heard since 9/11 is, we got the Sunnis and the Shias, and they'll attack each other, they'll kill each other. Well, one of the things that's happened with ISIS, and you talk about ISIS in Syria and Iraq, is there's an Al-Qaeda backed group, Al-Nusra, which has also now joined ISIS. They were fighting against each other, but see, they've realized, hey, they've got a common enemy. And that's what's happened with the Sunnis and the Shias. That's what happened with Islam and whole, is as they realize they have a common enemy, they're going to start working together. Because, see, what they have with each other is a rivalry. What they have against us is enmity. And so they want to take care of the enemy first. They can take care of the rivalry later. That's what's starting to happen. So the question is now, I want you to bring up real quick, I wanted to ask which we should do. But before we do that, once again, this is recent news. Yemen, now what's going on in Yemen as of?
Some kind of anarchy.
They're holding the president hostage of the country right now, Yemen.
The country's
it is
falling
yet
apart.
Another country in the Middle East falling, just as Libya fell.
Now, where did those Guantanamo Bay released prisoners go?
Yemen.
Spelled Y-E-M-E-N.
Yemen.
Unbelievably
Okay, so we have a government that's unwilling to admit who the enemy is, and I use the word enemy carefully, because I understand that there are people out there that are Muslim who are quote-unquote peaceful Muslims. However, like the Germans during the Nazi regime, they're doing nothing to stand against this. They're not voicing out against it, first of all. Second of all, and this is just my own personal opinion, I'm of the same opinion that if you follow the Quran, if you're a Muslim, if you believe that you're part of the faith of Islam, when that jihadism is happening, you're dancing in the streets too, because you really want the violence even though you're not partaking in it. And I do believe that the real crux of it all is the violence that the Quran teaches. And here's the thing. We're not worried about being careful about what we say about what happened in Nigeria or so forth, because, they're not worried about, a bunch of Roman Catholics or a bunch of Protestants going on the rampage and burning down a bunch of buildings. But yet, and this is my point, yet in Paris, we got to be careful what we say because we don't want to make them angry. If they're so peaceful, why are we worried about making them angry?
Let me inject a thought here about Paris or what have you. It seemed to me almost overnight in both France and Belgium that they got religion. And all of a sudden they are speaking up about that we need to do something. And in fact, the mayor of Brussels, who is a Muslim, has said, hey, if you don't want peace, if you don't want to live in a peaceful country, get out. I think it's time that we needed to go there.
Also, the president of Egypt spoke to the imams, and he spoke to a Muslim audience, and he said, you folks have to do something. You cannot let this go on. You do the preaching, and you have to stop it.
Okay, and what's going on regarding Islam, that war, those battles that are going on, that's not the only battle going on in the world. When we come back, we're also going to talk about the battle between the Republicans and the Tea Party there in Washington. That is an interesting topic. So when we come back, that's where we're going. And then at the end of the show, media bias, the polls, and an informed or uninformed public. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Professional law offices of Hartzler & Hartzler have provided affordable legal expertise to Pass area businesses and families. If your business is considering contracts, litigation, employee, or product services, Mark Hartzler, licensed California attorney, will guide and represent your company's requirement, addressing both external and internal threats to your business with his valued experience since 1994. Mark's law partner and wife, Nancy Hartzler, also a licensed California attorney, provides legal guidance and expertise in wills, trusts, and estate planning. Nancy helps clients and their families through trust administration and the complicated probate process. Call Hartzler & Hartzler for a complimentary telephone consultation at 213-864-3572. That's 213-864-3572.
If you want to learn more about the United States Constitution, buy the books by Douglas V. Gibbs, The Basic Constitution and 25 Myths of the United States Constitution. Or you can also check out his latest book, Silenced Screams, Abortion in a Virtuous Society. Find the links to purchase these books online at politicalpistachio.com, and the links will be at the top of the page. Also, check out Doug's Constitution classes in Temecula and Corona, douglasvgibbs.com, to learn more about those. And the Constitution Association meets on the first Saturday of each month. Go to constitutionassociation.com to learn more about the group.
Are you considering buying or selling a home, a commercial space, or some land in the Pass area? Think about Cherry Valley Realty, the oldest realtor office in the Pass area. This family-owned company has been in business for more than 40 years. They're happy to say that so many of their customers come back after selling or buying a property. Stop in, take Cherry Valley Boulevard exit off the I-10 freeway to Beaumont Avenue. It's located at 10385 Beaumont Avenue in downtown Cherry Valley. Or call them at 951-845-2637. That's 951-845-2637. Or the website at cherryvalleyrealty.com. 951-845-2637. cherryvalleyrealty.com. Welcome to a Tea Party Minute. Who and what are the Tea Party? You may have heard good and bad things about it. Back in 2008, the Tea Party formed from a grassroots movement. Not a political party, just everyday people you probably know. At the time, during the massive government bailout, people began to take notice, ask questions. Gradually, these groups got together and realized that Washington wasn't following the Constitution very well. And in 2010, 2012, and again in 2014, they elected some people to Congress who believe more in our Constitution than in their own re-election, and that this is the people's government, not the government's government. That's a good thing. And there's lots more to tell you about what the Tea Party is. Why not join us? The Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley Tea Party meets the second Thursday of each month at the Farmhouse Restaurant in Banning. And check us out on Facebook at BBCV TeaParty.net.
Welcome back to Conservative Voice Radio on KMET AM 1490. My name is Douglas V. Gibbs. You can learn more about me at douglasvgibbs.com. I'm surrounded by members of the Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley Tea Party, Glenn, Tom, and Jan. And this next topic I wanted to discuss on the show is the GOP versus the Tea Party. We seem to have this idea that the Tea Party and the Republican establishment are there to war against each other. And as I like to explain to people, we don't want to take over. When I say we, the Tea Party or the conservatives, we don't want to take over. We want to get these guys back on the right track. The thing is, the platform of the Republican Party is fine. It's a good platform. But many of the Republicans are not willing to follow that platform. They want to tweak it. They follow the propaganda that the progressives put out that you can't talk about this, you got to be careful with this issue. And so they're so busy trying to appeal to people to the left of them that they've abandoned the platform. Now we saw this begin to culminate in the battle at the beginning of the year over the Speaker of the House position. Boehner was up for Speaker of the House, and there was 25 Republicans that dissented against that. What was it, 2 or 3 Republicans that actually put their names, Gohmert and a couple of other folks that threw their name in the hat. And the 25 Republicans that voted against Boehner wound up punished for it. So there is a battle for the party going on, and it seems like the establishment is not accepting the more conservative members of the House as compatriots, but more as the enemy, and they're trying to squash them. Now, as we talk about this battle that's going on in the party, Tom, and we see it mostly in Washington. I mean, it's everywhere, but we really see it in Washington. We really have been seeing it in the House of late. What's your opinion about that?
Number one, I'm not sure the 25 men who kind of bolted as far as not supporting Boehner were really Tea Party people necessarily. I think they had a problem with Boehner's leadership.
Right, okay.
With the subject here, of course, is Tea Party versus GOP.
But no, I want to expand on that, though. Okay. So what you're saying is there's some members of the Republican Party aren't necessarily Tea Party guys, may not even necessarily call themselves conservatives, but Boehner's leadership has been so lacking that even they were willing to put themselves at risk and stand against him.
And honestly, maybe I'm going the wrong way here. With Boehner, I think he's a good guy. He says good things, but he maybe speaks 2-3 sentences every 3 weeks. It's not enough. We need a guy to speak, to talk about the bully pulpit, which we're being bombarded with.
I'm going to take what you just said. You think Boehner is a good guy or whatever. He's just not saying it right. Glenn, you disagree, I think. We've had this conversation. Boehner's not the good guy that Tom seems to think he is. He's more of an establishment minion or what?
I didn't say he was not a good guy. I think he is a good guy, but I think he's not being assertive in the sense that when Congress took over here at this last election, by extending the budget until September, it's almost a full year now that they're not going to have the hammer of that budget to hold over the Democratic Party, control the budget. They've given that up. They did a continuing resolution. All except for Homeland Security. And they're going to have a showdown on that. And they're already negotiating on that. But that's what people are upset about. They feel like that after this election, they immediately should have did a continuing resolution to extend it until Congress was seated. And then the budget should be broken up in the regular order and pass each department bit by bit, one at a time, piecemeal it. Yeah. Right on through. Mm-hmm. And then
the budget, don't you think it should be piecemealed so that this part can be approved, this part can be approved, instead of I don't like this, but I like this, so I have to approve the whole thing.
Right. Now, what I'd like to see Boehner do right now is get up there and start wielding that hammer and actually controlling Congress, and basically take the position and pass a resolution requesting all the governors to get ready to take over Homeland Security. Shut that department down.
How influenced is he by the Democrats?
How influenced is he?
Very good question.
I think he's willing to work across the line, and I think he should take a position.
But to the point that it's detrimental, though?
Well, I think working across the lines is it's not what the Democrats do. They work to defeat Republicans.
Well, they have a collective mindset.
They have a collective mindset. That's the problem with Roe Reese. He's part of that collective mindset instead of having any independence at all. The problem with Boehner, it's like herding a bunch of cats. They are independent and they think a little bit for themselves.
I asked my son one time about his opinion about the battle within the Republican Party, and he's an artist, so what he did is he drew me a picture. I think I've shown it to you before. And he drew these two elephants with bumps on their heads and bruises on their face and black eyes, and they got their boxing gloves on, and these two elephants are just beating each other up, and then on the sleeve of one of the boxing gloves it says GOP, and on the sleeve of the other one says T. Are the two just battling it out? Is the Tea Party detrimental or to the party, or are they there to help? What's going on here?
It's called a backbone.
Go ahead, Jan.
The thing that I find remarkable, we have to back up a bit and watch what happened to the Democrat Party. They used to consist of moderates and progressives. What happened is the progressives kicked out the moderates, like Lieberman. They became independents. Now, on the right, we have people like John McCain, who was a moderate. He was constantly crossing the aisle from the days of Teddy Kennedy.
So rather than throw him out, they embraced him.
They embraced him until he ran for president, and then he was evil incarnate. But this is their game. The point is the Republicans are actually eating their own. Instead of looking at the grassroots movement that brought the Tea Party into power in 2010 and actually brought the GOP into power that year, they then discarded. It was like, okay, box of Kleenex, we don't need you anymore. And those people that were elected by the Tea Party are saying, wait a minute, we have a moderate faction. We expect our voice to be heard.
I wonder if it's a case of Stockholm syndrome, where the liberators, the Tea Party, has come in, but they've been controlled by their, who's been imprisoning them, the left, for so long. And rather than working with the liberators, they said, "Hey, left, here's these liberators. Help us get rid of these guys because we don't want to be freed because you've been taking care of us."
That's an excellent analogy.
Well, then you have people like Ted Cruz, who is standing up for what the Tea Party was elected for. And they made sure they made him a pariah because essentially he stands for the people and that movement that brought him in. So this is the conundrum right now.
So how does it resolve?
Those guys stood up to Boehner, and then Boehner made a speech and said, we're going to have a family discussion like a patriarch.
Right.
However, what he could have done, and he would have gotten brownie points from everyone, he could have said, we'll have a family discussion and said to those Tea Party people, what do you want? How can we work together privately?
Now, how's that resolved, though? How do we resolve that?
How would it resolve them? They would be one voice as the Democrats.
Well, here's what I mean by that question. You know, you get your filet mignon that, you know, gets elected, you know, and then he goes into the meat grinder of Washington. He winds up ground beef just like the rest of them because he gets there and the leadership says, okay, I'm glad you got elected. You got elected on your ideals. You're a great conservative. Now you're going to have to set all that aside and play by the rules that we tell you to play by, or you're not going to be on any committees. You're never going to get any Republican money. You're never going to get reelected. So play ball or you're gone.
And
then they assign their staffers to this conservative, and the staffers then, you know, are, you know, playing the game along, because I think personally the bureaucrats are really the ones that run the country, the staffers. But, you know, so how do you resolve that? How do you stop that from happening?
That is why we're here. Unless we tell the people they have the power, they put that Tea Party faction in office in 2010. Unless they tell the establishment GOP, you have to remember the Constitution. You have to remember why we put you there.
Well, you know, people don't realize the power they have. When I was discussing the Constitution in a recent Constitution class in Corona on Tuesday, one of the things we talked about was the abolition movement and the women's rights movement and the prohibition movement when it came to alcohol. The Christian women were the ones that were behind those three pushes, and they completely changed the nation. It began during the early 1800s. As a matter of fact, 1808 is really when the prohibition movement started. It was the Christian women in the nation that brought about the abolition of slavery, that brought about the prohibition of alcohol. Now, I'm not talking about whether it was good or bad, but this is what they affected. They affected the nation. But now remember, they couldn't vote.
I was going to say
they have
exactly
that much power because they were doing, whether they can vote or not.
Right.
And that's what people don't realize is we have a lot of power.
They stood up.
We have a lot of power. Glenn, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I just want to give an example about what you just said. Eric Cantor was in leadership in Congress. Mm-hmm. He was running in a primary in Virginia this last election, last summer. The Tea Party groups in that area got together and supported a professor that ran for that position. Eric Cantor spent $5 million versus $200,000 or $300,000 by the Tea Party candidate. Eric Cantor lost that election because thousands of people got off the couch and supported a Tea Party candidate. And so the people out there listening in Banning, Beaumont, and Cherry Valley need to understand, also in San Jacinto and Hemet, that 1, 2, or 3 people can make a difference in a congressional election if they get off the couch and get involved in a local group. You got the local Women's Republican Club. You got the local Tea Party group now in the area. There's several of them forming down in the desert. And Hemet and San Jacinto's talking about a new Tea Party group. And Oath Keepers are starting to form groups all over the county. So there's a backlash taking place right now.
Absolutely, there is. Now, in the interest of time, because we're down to the final 5 minutes, and I have one more topic I want to get to. Final words about this GOP versus Republican battle, Tom?
Wow, you really stirred up the hornet's nest here.
That's good.
It almost seems to me that they're irreconcilable, that maybe there should be distinctive parties.
One wonders. Let me let Jan get in her final words, just a few, 30 seconds.
Well, I think it's going to really tell the future of the Republican Party by how this shakes out. As a Tea Party, I would say, leader, Ted Cruz said that if we do the very same thing we've done in the last couple of elections, we will lose to a Democrat again.
Glenn, what's your final thoughts on that topic?
My final thought is get off the couch, folks. Come join us. Participate. Become one of the 3%ers in the United States. They're going to move this country back to Americanism.
My final thoughts on the GOP versus the Tea Party is what happened in July of 2014 in Marietta over the immigration issue. 3 young ladies got talking about how we had all these illegal immigrants being shipped into Marietta. It was causing an increase in the number of illnesses locally, among other things. 3 women got together and talked. 6 women then went to the Marietta birthday bash, handed out a bunch of flyers about what was going on, while 12 people were protesting in Temecula over it. The following day, over 100 people showed up. Later on, the following week, over 200 people were there, and they turned around buses full of illegal immigrants they did not want in their city. And it became nationally recognized. Fox News, you name it, they were all talking about it. Marietta was the news because 3 women decided to talk. It's amazing how much we get done. Okay, in the last 3 minutes, I want to talk about this. Media bias, the polls, and an informed public, which really ties into what we've been talking about. So, we're trying to inform the public. That's why we're on the radio. Because we know that the media bias and the polls are, for lack of a better way of putting it, full of it. And so we're going to try to put it out there. Now, there's other tools. There's a social media, online, all of that jazz. I mean, I have my websites, politicalpistachio.com. You got yours, glennstoll.com, and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the media bias, how do we overcome that media bias? And is it as biased as people, as we seem to think, or is this just being exaggerated, Jan?
Well, I have long suspected it was biased, liberal-wise, and then I realized TV shows, even, of course, talk shows on cable news, have a slant to the liberal left. And, I'm being entertained. I don't need to be lectured. I'm going to find my information.
Right.
However,
and you see it in movies and television series, the whole bit.
There's always a message. However, I just read a book that stunned me. It's called Stonewalled, and it's by Cheryl Atkinson. Mm-hmm. And she was a CBS reporter.
Right.
She has left. She recounts all of the, incidents that have occurred in the last couple of years. Republicans call them scandals. And the White House calls them phony scandals. But what was so intriguing about the book and took my breath away was the real story about media bias is in that book. Get it. You will be amazed.
Tom, what's your feelings?
I have a much broader conversation about journalism in general. I think we have a lack of journalism, and there's supposedly super colleges out there, Columbia University and so on. We need to do something about it to make them really journalists, or they should get booted out as far as I'm concerned.
Final words?
My feeling about journalism is they used to be like a secret police in a country.
Watchdog.
Watchdog, right. They
good.
would go after corruption and ferret it out. And it's just like the last collapse in the economy. We had a lot of corruption in real estate. And I didn't see the National Association of Realtors take any responsibility for the collapse in real estate. And they're supposed to be the leaders in that industry, where they investigated by journalists.
And the media has not been the leaders, and that wraps us all up. Thank you for listening. This has been Conservative Voice Radio. I am your host, Douglas V. Gibbs. Catch us every week right here on KMET 1490 AM. And once again, visit the website for the Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley Tea Party at glennstoll.com, and you can visit what I do at douglasvgibbs.com. We'll see you next week. The preceding program was produced by the Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley Tea Party. You can visit their website at BBCV TeaParty.com and by Douglas V. Gibbs. You can learn more about Doug at DouglasVGibbs.com. We would like to thank our sponsors, Hartzler and Hartzler, attorneys at law, the Banning, Beaumont, Cherry Valley Tea Party, and Cherry Valley Realty. This program came to you on KMET 1490 AM and worldwide at KMET1490am.com. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you next week.